Welcome to part 1 of Between the Lines, a brand new Sugar Bernina quilt along. Hi there, and welcome to the very first part of Between the Lines. This is a Sugar Bernina quilt along, and I'm going to be your host. My name is Irene, and this is the Sugar Studio. So from here, I will be teaching you 9 different rows. I'm going to show you how to make these and turn it into a wonderful quilt. And we're going to do this together every 4 weeks. We're going to make a new row, and after that we will assemble it and talk about the quilting. We will do the binding together, so we will finish the whole project together. But first, today it's time for the very first row of the quilt, and that is Rush Hour. Rush Hour is row number 5. It is the yellow row that you see behind me. And why Rush Hour? Well, I came up with that name because, well, when you would look at a row of cars during rush hour, it might look something like that from above. So that is what we will be making today. And yesterday I already posted a video about preparing your background fabric. So if you follow that video, you will have a nice pile of strips that we're going to use mostly at the end of the quilt along, but one of those 1-inch strips we're going to use today. And then you have, of course, your background fabric and your fabrics for the quilt. And then we can start with sewing our very first row. So what do we need today? We will need our background fabric, and we are going to use the yellow fabrics. So here I have my fat quarter bundle, and we're going to use the 2 yellow fabrics, and I'm also going to use one of the gray ones, and you can just choose which one you like best. For this row I'm going to use this one, and then this can be put together back together for our next row, so we don't use these today. I'm going to give these a little press and get back to you to start cutting. A little side note before we start sewing, when you want to make a more improv version of the row, please do check out the instructions on the Bernina blog, because there you find not only this version of the row, but also the version you see over here, which is a little bit more random and has some improv piecing in there. So if you just want to make this one, you can follow the video instructions. If you want to have the improv version, hop over to the Bernina blog, which you will find a link to in the description down below. There we have the fabrics. Let's start with cutting 60 squares of 1.5 by 1.5 inches from our background fabric. That's our 60 squares, and now we need 14 rectangles of 1 by 2.5 inch. This is not 5 inch. I'm just going to leave these for maybe another row and cut a new strip. That is all the background fabric we need, so we can put this away and then start cutting the yellow and gray fabric. From the yellow fabrics we need 7 and 8 rectangles, and from the gray fabric we only need 1. So I'll cut that one first. And the size of the rectangles that we need is 7 by 2.5 inches. 7 inches. Let's see how squared this corner is. Yeah, that looks quite good. So 7 by 2.5 inches. one in gray, and then yellow triangles we need 8, and the yellow squares we need 7. There we go. Everything we need for this row is now cut. So what are we going to do? We are going to make triangles on the corners of the rectangles, and for that you place your little squares on the corners. We are going to sew like following this line, so we're going to sew from point to point, and you can either mark a line with a pen or pencil in the middle, so from point to point, so that you see where you need to sew, or you can use a little tape on your sewing machine. I'm going to show that in a bit. So the steps are: sew the triangle, cut, fold it open, and then we're going to sew another one on each corner. So this is going to be the shape that we're going for, and then of course another triangle in that corner. So let's go through the steps, and then you know how to make this one. There we go. Here I have my fabric and my little background square, and I want to sew from corner to corner, and you can, as I mentioned, mark a line from corner to corner, or you can use something like this. So this tape has a line, and that runs from my needle straight down here. So when I have my point here under my needle, and I make sure that this point here is along the center line, then I know I'm going to sew in a straight line. So that's what you're going to do for all the triangles. This is just a scrappy piece to get started. So when my needle is in that first corner, I'm just going to move this a little bit so that this is lining up with this line here. And there we go. I just have to look here and make sure that that point is following the line. And now the line is gone, but I'm just make sure that it's going straight towards my needle. And I'm going to chain piece, which means that I'm just going to continue sewing without cutting my thread. So on each rectangle I'm now going to add one square, and that's going to be one corner triangle. Time to cut the pieces loose, and then we can trim off the little corners. So from every square you're going to trim off a little triangle, then it's ready to press. And then it's time to press everything. So I like to finger press first and then just put an iron on it. And there you have a lovely first corner on one of the rectangles. So we're going to repeat this for every rectangle, and then again we repeat it for every square. So all the rectangles should get 4 squares on every corner, a square. When you're going to sew the second square on one of the sides, you will just sew over that first triangle. That's why it's important to first cut and press it open, and after that you place a new square on top, and that will just sew over that first sewn triangle. There you go. So then you cut this like so, and then again you press it open, and that will give you that nice pointy edge of your triangle. So that is how you do the second one on each side. Whoops, a little flaw in my explanation here. At the beginning of the video I said that you need 60 background squares to make these triangles on the rectangles, but actually, so yeah, that 60 is correct, but you can't put 4 squares on all of the rectangles. You have 2 yellows, so 1 from each, and that only need 2 rectangles, so those only need 1 pointy side, and the other side should stay just squared, because these are going to go on the outer edges of the row, and that's going to be cut off, so you don't actually need to sew the squares there. But I just cut 4 extra squares and put squares on all of them. Yeah, so let's start putting this row together. There we go, let's put our row together, and for that we need our tiny rectangles, and we need our yellow and gray pieces. We are going to sew these back to back, and after that we're going to cut the row to 53 inches, and then we are going to sew these 2 rows together. So make sure to check out the blog post to see the positioning. Oops, missing there a little triangle. To see the positioning of the gray piece. So the gray is going to go at the bottom, and it's going to be in between somewhere. You can either pick your own position for your gray triangle, your gray rectangle, or you can look at the blog post to see where I'm going to put it. Yeah, so now you can go ahead and sew these rectangles between the bigger rectangles. It's going to give a tiny strip of 1/2 inch in between each of them. And there you have 2 strips of rectangles sewn together. So this is going to be the top one, and this is going to be the bottom one with the gray accent piece. And if you look closely, so I'm just going to zoom in for you, this is not perfect. And the reason why it's difficult to get this perfect is because you're sewing on the bias. So you're sewing on the most stretchy part of fabric on that diagonal line. And that is why your edge of the triangle might not be completely straight. And that is why when you sew it together, it might not be, I'm going to back up a little bit, so it might be a little bit like this, or not completely in a straight line. And some of the points will be perfect, and some of the points won't, and some of these center strips will be a little bit wonky. That's all okay. This is a perfect row to practice sewing those triangles and trying to get them as neatly as possible. But I just wanted to show you that also on my rows it's not perfect. Some points are snipped off, cut off a little bit. Sometimes this is not sewn completely straight, and it's quite stretchy, and that's why it's difficult to get that perfectly. But I'm just going to continue. So what are we going to do now? We are going to cut off the rows. So we need to cut the rows to 53 inches. And one of the sides is going to stay intact, and one of the sides is going to be cut. And how we're going to do that is I'm going to fold this, and I'm going to measure. So 53 divided by 2 is 25, 26 and a half. So fold it in half. This should be 26 and a half. So I'm going to, let's see, what's the easiest way to do this? Maybe I'll put this on the 26 and a half mark. And then I should fold this at the start here. There we go. Then I'm just going to flip it so that I don't cut into my blocks. Then this should be 26 and a half. And times 2, that makes 53 inches. So I'm going to cut it off over here. And now you also see why you didn't need those squares at the end. And then we have one complete row. Let's do the other one as well. And I have 3 rectangles on this side and 4 on this side. So I would like to cut off one of these, I guess. Wow, doesn't really matter. Let's see in the pattern what I did there. Yes, so the 4th one is going to be cut off, so I'm going to position this at 26 and a half and then fold it. There we go, flip it. And check, 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 and double check, because it's really no fun when you cut through your perfectly sewn row at the incorrect position. There we go, 26 and a half. Perfect. And now the last thing we need to do is get your 1-inch strip and also cut it to 26 and a half. Well, if you already have 53-inch strips, then you're good to go, but I cut mine a little bit longer just in case, but I don't think we will need just in case. 26 and a half. So now we can pin this together, and this is going to be the bottom row. Just going to start with this one. I'm going to fold it in half and then mark the center with a little crease here, and also do the same for this strip. Mark the center here. And then I'm going to pin this. Let's put in some pins. I pin at the center, I pin at both ends, and then I just put some pins in the middles as well. So the middles, I mean the centers. So bring the center to the edge to the center, and then I also mark this crease a little bit. Because this is such a thin strip, it's quite stretchy. And that's why I like to put in a lot of pins. Otherwise your sewing machine can just scoop it like this, push it like this a little bit, and that will give you some puckers. And we don't like puckers. So there we go. Put in a lot of pins and sew at 1/4 inch, and then you're good to add the second row. It's added to the bottom row. So now we add the top row. And I have my cut off edge on this side. So for the top row, I'm going to put the top cut off edge on that side. If we would not do that, so now you can see the rectangles are not aligned, and that's the look that I'm going for. If you flip it around, you will have them aligned, and I thought it just looks more interesting to have it aligned like this. So I'm going to find the center of both rows, do the pinning again and the sewing, and then we are done with the very first row, rush hour. Ta-da! There it is, the very first row of the quilt along, rush hour. It's row number 5 in the quilt. Happy yellows. And if you're making it with a teal green kit, then you're going to be sewing with the dark green robots. The dark green robots and the green rectangle fabric. But we made it in yellow, and it's going to be here, over here. So on here you see some modifications, and this one looks a little bit more random. And that is because I did some improv quilting on this, improv piecing, and how you can add those details to your row. Check out the blog post for that. So yeah, there we have it, the very first one. I'm very excited that we officially started sewing, and well, I hope to see you in the next one. Good luck with your sewing, and if you have any questions, leave them down below in the comments or on the Facebook group, which you will find the link to in the description down below, or in the comments on the Bernina blog. We're all here to help you make your beautiful quilt. Thank you so much. Bye!